Great. This is great. We welcome everybody and sorry for the delay, but we're so glad you're here and we have such a nice number of you. And thank you especially to Cantor Manny, who is we are using his class time tonight for our meeting, and that's great. We appreciate it. So tonight, through Adult Education and Cantor Manny, we are coming together really in a sacred spirit of remembrance to mark the 2023rd day of remembrance, of Holocaust remembrance, Yom HaShoa. The official date is always the 27th of Nisan, and this date was selected by the Israeli Knesset Parliament back in 1951. As you're probably all aware, there's been programs all week on TV, online, special articles, and all kinds of Jewish publications online. And it's wonderful to see that people all around the world are acknowledging this memorial occasion. Stories, so many stories.
Underwater marketing is helping.
There's so many stories, at least 6 million, if not more, stories of our people, stories of people who have perished and we don't even know their name, and stories of people who are very much alive and able to share with us. So let's not lump all these stories together. Let's think that each story is related to a very special, unique individual. And we're lucky enough to hear one of those stories tonight. In the past, through Temple Bethel, we have connected and heard from other Holocaust survivors in our community, and we're very grateful for that. But tonight, we want to shine the light on Agnes Borhegyi and her family. Agnes has been part of our Temple Bethel community for about 3 years now. And her story has traveled all the way from Budapest to New York to South Florida, as she has so many interesting things to share with us. I'm just asking that you all hold your questions till Agnes is finished talking, but she will have time for questioning. And thank you, and I turn it over to Agnes.
I'm just going to interrupt for a minute to suggest that everybody mute themselves.
Oh, yes, I meant to say that.
Ready? Okay. I'm not muted, right? Okay. Good. So nice to see everybody. And I'll try to keep it brief so that we'll have time for questions if you have any to answer. Maybe I should not put it on speaker view because this way I can't see you. Okay. Anyway, I was born in Budapest, Hungary in 1939, and that was Hungary was effectively the last country that the Nazis invaded. Actually, Hungary was a German ally all along, but then anyhow, that's the history. But then the invasion by Germany happened in 1944. So I was born in Budapest. My father was taken to a first forced labor camp in 1943. I was very little, so it's just from what my mother told me before we got to the ghetto. I basically remember from the time that we were invaded. But my father was taken in 1943 to a forced labor camp in the Carpathian Mountains, and then to concentration camp in Bergen-Belsen in Germany, and then to the second concentration camp in Theresienstadt, which was German-occupied Czechoslovakia. So my mother and I were in Budapest, in the ghetto. First we lived in an apartment building.
But we'll find you want right now?
I don't think everybody is muted.
I just muted the voice. Go on, Agnes, please.
All
Thank
right.
you.
So my mother and I lived in an apartment building in Budapest, Hungary, where there were some non-Jews, and also Jews were allowed to live there, bearing this yellow Star of David. And I think we're having some trouble with the transmission, no?
No,
No?
go
Okay,
on.
fine. We lived in this apartment building. We had to wear the yellow Star of David. At that time, I was almost 5 years old. And there was not much food and not much coal for heating. This was in the winter, but it was better than concentration camp. We Jews were not allowed to go down to the bomb shelter when the bombs were falling while Budapest was being bombed. So we had to be in the courtyard of the building against the wall. And I remember one small bomb fell into the middle of the courtyard, and the detonation threw me out of my mother's arms. And when she found me, she told me that I had asked her if we're dead or alive. And she told me we were alive, and I said, I don't believe you. She said, if I pinch you and you feel it, then you're alive. So this is one of the little memories that I have, being pinched, and my mother said, you see, you felt it, we are alive. Not that I really knew at the age of 4 what alive or dead meant, but I've heard it, from my mother. So we were living in this apartment building, and my mother got taken away twice by the Hungarian version of the Gestapo, or the it was called the Arrow Cross. I don't know if any of you heard of that expression. It was the Hungarian version of the Nazi brigade, the Gestapo. And so they came, and I clearly remember, very clearly, when they dragged my mother down the stairs. We lived 2 flights up. They were dragging her down the stairs, and she had no one to live me with but a neighbor, because she didn't know anyone in that area. And I was screaming, don't leave me, and my mother was crying, and so I clearly remember that part. She was detained for 2 days, 2 nights, with a bunch of people in a gathering place where they were waiting for the train to come and take them to the concentration camps. I don't know which one they would have taken her to. And the train didn't arrive because I think because the Russians bombed the track, a lot of the tracks already, and there was no transportation, so they turned them loose. And my mother said that when they said you can go, nobody moved, because they were afraid it was a trick and they would be shot. Finally, someone did move, and so she came back. And about 2 weeks later, the exact same thing happened again. These Arrow Cross guys came and dragged her by the arm down the stairs, same scenario. I remember it very clearly, me screaming. And again, she was away, I think 2 or 3 days, and same thing happened. They couldn't find trains to transport them. And this was towards the end of the war now. The Russians were very close, but the Germans were still trying to do as much harm as possible. And unfortunately, the Hungarians were all too happy to help, I have to tell you. It was really, it was a very anti-Semitic country at that time. It may not be fair to say now, I don't know, but at that time, definitely everybody hated the Jews. So anyhow, my mother came back the second time. And a couple of weeks later, we were transported to the ghetto with the other Jewish tenants from the building and a lot of other people. And we were in a coal cellar or storage cellar of this building in the sections of place of the city, the ghetto. And they brought us twice a day. I remember they brought us a metal aluminum cup of something they called soup, but it was barely anything in it, just liquid, twice a day. We were there for 6 weeks with no other food, no toilet facilities. The man dug, and I'm sorry to say this while some of you are eating dinner, but the man dug a hole in one of the corner of the basement, and that's where everybody had to go. So this went on for about 6 weeks. And I was small to begin with, and then I was weak, and I was like skin and bones. There was a long wood, like picnic table they put in the cellar, and 2 benches on the sides, and that's where we had to stay. And the children who were small enough to fit across the table were allowed to lay down in front of their whatever mother or parents, and the grown-ups had to just sleep, bending over the table and sleep there. And so there was almost no food, and it was cold and miserable. And so, as I said, we were there for 6 weeks. And I have a story to tell you before we were taken to the ghetto, how the Hungarians felt. We had to wear the yellow Star of David. So there was this older man in the building who used to see me before we had to wear the yellow star, and he would come and say, "Hello, little girl, how are you?" Being friendly. And the first time he saw me wearing the yellow Star of David, he spit on me, which was, I still remember this clearly. I'm trying to give you other memories. The ghetto got liberated in January 1945, January 18th, actually, 1945. I remember this clearly because it was a couple of days before my birthday. And my mother, I was so weak that my mother had to carry me in her arms back to the apartment house where we were previously, because I couldn't walk, even though I was 5 years old. I was so weak. Anyhow, I'm trying to think of other memories. We went back to the apartment building, and my mother kept telling me, Daddy is coming. I didn't know my father. I don't have no recollection of my father before the ghetto, because he was taken in 1943, I think. I was too little. So my mother kept telling me that he was going to return and he was going to come home. Of course, she didn't know. We had no news whatsoever. And then in May 19th, the camp that he was, the last concentration camp that he was in, which was Theresienstadt, that was in Czechoslovakia, his camp got liberated, I think in April, middle of April 1945, and he returned late May 1945 on foot and whatever, hitchhiking, whatever transportation he could get. And that was the first time that I knew him, when he returned in 1945. There are so many flash memories that I have little ones that are just too many and really, honestly, too painful to even relive. I've been speaking to children. You are the first adult group that I'm speaking with. I have spoken to children in my grandchildren's school. I have 4 grandchildren, they're all grown now, but when they were younger, each school invited me to speak to the class, and I told the children, because it's important that the children know and carry on. We already kind of know what happened, but it's important that the young people know and are able to do that. And last few months, I've been speaking with, there is a synagogue in Long Island that one of my friends has a connection with, and they asked me to speak to the children about my experiences. These were all 13, 14-year-olds. And I'm not sure they had the time, they were able to comprehend the time frame and everything, because how 13 years old are, they can't imagine what happened 60 something years ago, 70. But anyhow, I tried to tell them how important it was to repeat the story. And last night I was on a Zoom meeting with this temple. They had a Yom HaShoa service, and the children that I spoke to got up and repeated the story. Whatever I got out of my story, repeated it to the congregation. So I was happy to know that some of it sunk in. And I don't know if you'll have any questions. I just wanted to, can I show a picture of my parents?
Yes, and could you tell us their names, Agnes?
Yes. Okay. The last name is Fisher, Fischer, and my mother's name was Lily, and my father's name was Laszlo. And let me see if I can point it. This is, of course, a picture when they were already retired in Florida. Thank you for looking at it.
Oh, of course. Could you tell us a little bit of what happened when you were reunited and the process of leaving Budapest?
Yes. Yes. Well, when my father came home, my father was a dry cleaner before the war. And he had a small shop, a small store. And of course, that got all destroyed during the war, the bombing and everything, and the looting. So when he came home, he rebuilt the store, and the machinery that was there got all destroyed. So my father drew up the sketches of what had to be done, and then he hired a mechanic to build a dry cleaning machine. It's no small feat to do that. And so he was also a master dyer. And you probably don't know what that means, because, in Europe, money was not plentiful and people wore their clothes for a long time. They couldn't afford to buy a new coat every season. So what happened was, if it got faded or they got tired of the color, they brought a little sample of color to my father, and my father re-dyed it. There was a process. You had to be a chemist to know how to mix the colors to make it to match the sample. And so he was a master of that. So it was in the same trade, dry cleaning and dyeing store. So he rebuilt that, and we lived in Hungary from 1945. Continued to live in Hungary after the war from 45 to 1956. There was a revolution, backtrack. When the Russian army liberated Hungary, after that, the communist regime took over. And I think I mentioned that to you previously. That's why I didn't have any religious education because religion was not observed in the communist country. So people got pretty fed up with the communist regime. And there was a revolution in 1956, in October 1956. Was a very short-lived revolution. They had really no chance of winning this against the Hungarians and the Russian army and every communist regime. But anyhow, during this time there was a lot of confusion and upheaval, and a lot of the soldiers were from the borders were sent to the city to fight. There were tanks and everything. It was a fight, an actual street by street fight, but they lost it. So my father decided to take advantage of this whole upheaval situation, and we traveled by train to the border, to the Austrian border, west of Budapest. And my father hired a guide, the people who lived on the border and knew the territory. For money, they helped you, escort you towards the border. So we escaped. It took us 2 nights, and we escaped through the border on foot with nothing but the clothes on our back. I mean, you couldn't carry any, you couldn't bring anything. You had to leave your whole home behind. And we crossed. Before we got to the border, the guide said, "You see that church steeple down there? That's Austria. Just walk that way." And we did. This was through the fields that were all frozen. This was in December of 1956. And the fields were all frozen. It was very hard to walk through, but we made it. My mother, my father, myself, and my father took one distant relative and her daughter with us. The father perished in concentration camps, so she was a widow and related by marriage to my mother. So anyhow, 5 of us, and another group. Of course, there were groups of people who were trying to do the same thing. We were not the only ones. We made it to Austria, to this small little village, to the church, and they were very, very nice to us. There were already blankets and food and warm drinks, whatever they were. This was in the middle of the night. And then my father spoke German, fluent German, because my grandmother was from Austria originally. She was Viennese. By the way, both my grandmothers perished in Auschwitz, along with my aunt, my uncle, and other family members. So anyway, we got to Austria, and then my father spoke German and was able to get us somehow. I don't even remember how we got the ride, but we went to Vienna the next day and went to the American consulate and applied for a visa. And that's my mother had a distant cousin here who sent us an affidavit of support, so we could prove that we were not going to be a burden on the state. And we waited. We were in Vienna for 6 weeks. The Jewish organization HaShoa, I'm sure that you are familiar with that. They helped us. They put us up in this inn kind of a thing, and we were there for 6 weeks. They gave us coupons for food in a certain cafe. It was like a Horn and Hardert kind of cafeteria. If somebody remembers Horn and Hardert, it was a long time ago. So they gave us vouchers, and so we had food and a little bit of shelter. 6 weeks in Vienna, and then they took us to a former military barracks that they converted to house Hungarian refugees. We were there another 6 weeks, and we were there in a huge room with, I think, 20, I don't remember, 24 or something, other people, families. And they gave us sheets to separate. And there were bunk beds, and they separated by sheets, each family. And we also, of course, got food there. And we waited 6 more weeks, so 3 months altogether before we were able to come to the United States. We came by military plane, prop plane, took us 26 hours.
Mhm.
And 2 stopovers in, oh God, I'm sorry, I can't remember anyhow, 2 stopovers to fuel. And we came to a place called Camp Kilmer in New Jersey. That was a military camp. And that's where they housed the Hungarian refugees until people were able to either our relatives came and got us, and people who didn't have relatives, different organizations, not only Jewish, but every organization helped place them someplace, got them work and helped them. Barbara, did you have more questions? You're muted.
Yeah. I don't want to be the only speaker. If other people have questions, if they can, give us a little signal. But
Can you hear me, Barbara?
Yes, yes.
I'm actually driving, so
Oh,
I want
yes,
to be
we hear
careful.
you.
Agnes, that was an amazing story, and you tell it so beautifully. I feel your fear when you said your mother was dragged away. Who were you with? You were 5 years old. Your mother's dragged away twice to a holding station, waiting for a train. Were you with her?
No. They did not take me. They didn't want me.
But where you stayed alone?
My mother originally was from a smaller town in Hungary, and then she got married. She moved to Budapest because my father lived in Budapest, and that's why she got there. So she had no one she knew. So there was this old Jewish couple. The man was in a wheelchair, and the Nazis didn't want them. So they lived in the building that we were in, and she left me with them, but they were very old, and she knew that they wouldn't be able to take care of me, but she had no choice. I mean, they just came and took her. And this trauma really lives in me until now.
Of course.
It's been a very, very long time, and I clearly remember. But she left me with these neighbors, Jewish neighbors, who were not wanted by the Arrow Cross.
I think Marlene wants to ask or speak.
You're muted, Marlene.
Yes, Agnes, you answered some questions that I have long wondered about. My father was from Hungary, and his relatives fled to Austria, and they're still there. They went to Vienna, where they were welcomed. He left before the war. But I'd like to just thank you for your courage of speaking of this. I've been watching the Holocaust shows on PBS this week, and to hear you tell it is amazing. And thank you for doing this.
It is. Thank you for listening, because I know that it's hard to listen to, and it's hard for me to speak about, but it's probably hard for you to listen to it as well. So I appreciate you listening.
I just have a question, Barbara. First of all, I am very impressed by your bravery, what you went through, and how your life is now compared to then. It is just amazing, and God bless you. I just want to find out, how did your mother come back? You said she was taken 2 times. So how did she get back? And then they took her again.
On foot.
She escaped by herself the first time. Am I understanding anything?
Both times. This all happened in Budapest.
Yeah.
So we lived in one area, and they took them to there were two places where they were, two gathering places where they took the people. One was the horse track, the racetrack, I should say, the racetrack, where of course there were no races during the war. So that was a big open space, and that's where they gathered hundreds and hundreds of these. It wasn't only my mother, hundreds and hundreds of people were gathered, ready to be transported by train to the concentration camp. And that train didn't come in. And so that was one place. And the second place, but there were two places in Budapest, excuse me, where they took them. One was the racetrack, and the other one was a brick factory that had a big open area. I have never been there, but I know of it. And second time they took them to the brick factory gathering area. And this, she had to walk back. I don't know how long it took her, but it was in the same city, but the other end of the city. Budapest is a fairly large city.
Have you ever gone back?
Yes, my husband, my late husband, okay, I was married when I was 19. By the time we got to America, I was 18. And the next year I met my husband here. He was also Hungarian and Jewish. And I'm sorry, I lost my, I'm just, I'm sorry, a little bit upset.
No problem, no problem.
Train of thought. So anyhow, you asked the original
Have you
question.
ever gone back to Hungary?
Oh yes, I'm so sorry. I keep thinking of the past. Yes, we have gone back because my husband really liked to go back. He still had friends from before he left, and he was 6 years older than I was, so he was a little more. He had a bigger circle of friends, you know, when he left, and he liked to go back. He also loved the food, which is very good actually. Hungarian food is very good to me. And
Agnes, I was wondering about your dad when he came back. Did he talk to you much about
father-in-law took a lot
the
of videos
concentration
and pictures
camp?
and whatever, and my daughter-in-law as well. Yes, we went back several times, but I am not going back anymore.
Barbara,
Yes.
Scott had his hand up.
Oh, yes, I'm sorry. I missed that. Yes, Scott.
Sorry, I was on mute. Hey, Agnes, it's Scott. So thank you for that. I love seeing you at the temple. So thanks for being a member. And my question is, do you remember, that's such a young age at 5 years of age, but do you remember at all how it was like, were there other kids your age in that area? Do you remember playing any kind of games? What did you do, on a sort of on a daily basis? Do you remember any of that?
Agnes is gone.
Okay.
We've lost
Agnes?
Agnes.
Okay, maybe inadvertently.
She was frozen on my
It
screen.
says, and here it says Zoom, my phone, Agnes says Zoom dropped. I am trying to reconnect.
Okay.
She's here.
There she is.
Agnes, unmute.
Sorry, my internet dropped. I'm sorry.
Not your fault.
Did you hear, Scott? He was asking, were there
Okay,
other kids
that's good.
with you? Repeat a little.
Agnes, hey, Agnes.
Yes.
So,
Hi.
I don't know if you heard. So I love seeing you at our services. Love just seeing you. So thanks for being a member, and love tonight hearing from you. So my question is, I know at age 5 it's very young, but do you remember what you did at all at that age? I mean, did you have friends? Were there games that you may have played?
I didn't have a childhood,
Can you
Scott.
remember any of that?
Can you hear me? I had
Yeah.
no childhood. I had Never mind friends or play. I mean, we had no food, no heat, no nothing. I had my mother and I, period.
Well,
Agnes, it's
So,
Bonnie.
Hi, Bonnie.
Yeah, my
Go ahead.
question is then, do you, I mean, at that age, did you ask, like, why is this happening? I mean, was it explained to you by your mom?
You know, my mom always spoke to me as an adult. I never had this, you know, goo goo baba kind of, you know, things, because that she had no one. My father was taken away, her friends were everybody, you know, so it was my mother and I, period. Yes, she spoke to me all the time, and she explained to me that bombs are falling, but we're gonna be okay, and we have no food now, but we will. And she always spoke to me like as if I were a grown up. And she tried to explain the best that she could that my father is going to come back, and she trusted that he would return.
Great, all right, well, thank you.
I would imagine that you're so weak and you're living your whole life in survival mode. And so are all the other children. Do you ever have nightmares?
Sharon, just repeat the last thing you said. I heard you before, but the last thing.
Do you ever have nightmares?
Did I ever have what?
Nightmares.
Or nightmares? Thank God, not really. I have daymares, if I can say that. I mean, you know, moments of awakeness when I remember all these things, and it's really, I see you, Bonnie, 1 second, I'm sorry.
Okay.
It's just amazing to me even that I could remember fragments, because I was so young, you know. And then interestingly, I don't remember a lot of the years that after my father came home. All I know is that we had food, we had shelter, we had a nice apartment, and we lived nicely. But I don't remember my classmates' names, or, you know, because I started school right after my father came back. You know, by the time I turned 6, I started school. And I don't remember, you know, a lot of people know the whole roster of classmates and whatever. I don't remember that, but I do remember all the traumatic things.
Yeah. I'm just amazed, you know, at 5 years old, that you remember a few things other than traumatic things. And when you tell your story, you said you were in the concentration camp with your mother?
No, a ghetto.
Okay.
Ghetto in Budapest. My father was in concentration camps
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Bonnie, you're
Agnes?
going to ask me
Okay.
something.
Yes.
Oh, Madeline, I don't know.
Agnes, first of all, I want to thank you. You are so strong, and your mother sounds like she was a very strong woman as well.
She does.
How do you maintain your faith in God?
That's a very good question, because, you know, my mother came from a fairly religious family. They kept a kosher home and everything before she got married.
Uh-huh.
And after what happened, after the Holocaust, she didn't want to know anything about religion.
Oh, wow.
She just didn't. So how do I maintain my, I think that my faith in God came later in life, not in the beginning.
Okay. That makes sense.
Fair enough.
And I have to say that all of you helped me do that in the last 3 years.
Aw.
Agnes, can I ask you, did you comprehend the hate that was around you? Did your mother clarify that for you? Can you hear? Am I muted or not?
No, you're not muted. I can hear you.
So you understand, when you saw all this horror around you, did you comprehend it? And did you wonder why, what's happening? Because up until that time, you had a fairly normal life, correct? Or you never had a
I
childhood?
never had a normal
Never
life.
had a normal life until
That I
you
can,
came to
that I can
America.
remember.
When you came to America is when your life totally changed, correct?
No, actually, after my father came back in 1945, that's when my life changed. But
When he came to America.
no, when
No.
he came back from concentration camp to Hungary in 1945.
That's when your life changed.
Yes, yes, but
Stay in Hungary when your father came back before you left.
Right.
What
we were
amount
in, we
was
stayed.
there?
I was born there, and I lived there until 1956 when there was this Hungarian revolution. Had nothing to do with the Jews. It had to do with the communist
Hungary.
era.
Right.
Yeah.
No. But how long, your father came home and everything was much, much better. And how long was it before you guys just left Budapest?
10 years. 10 years.
10
Oh.
years.
11, actually, 11. From 1945 to 1956, 11 years.
And those 10 years, you remember how different it was from before your father was with you?
Of course I do. I mean, I didn't have a father then. I didn't have a childhood. I
So
didn't
it
have
was an
anything.
unbelievable change in your life when your father came back.
Yes, that was the first time I met my father, other than the pictures that my mother showed me,
Wow.
what he looked like.
I can imagine your father as a very strong, resourceful person. And it seems astonishing that he wasn't able to kind of, I think you implied, restart his business once he came back. So I'd like to ask, do you know, like when he was in the concentration camp, did he possibly survive because of his skills, you know, with, no, it had
There-
nothing to do with that.
There were
I thought maybe,
no skills to be used. No, just
I
work.
thought-
They had to work, and
Okay.
first in the forced labor camp they had to work. In concentration camp, he never told me he had to work, but it was just, the barracks. You
Yeah,
see pictures.
okay. Yeah.
And he was let go after the war. That's how he got out. Otherwise, he could have
He
been killed.
got liberated by the Allied forces, by the American army.
But he was there a long time in the concentration camp.
From 1943 until 1945.
2 years. Wow.
Yes. And we were lucky because Hungary was the last country invaded by the Germans. Had we been in Poland, this would have been much longer. But
Right.
Hungary was the last country, and the Hungarian Jews were basically the last group of Jews that were taken to forced labor and concentration camp. The Germans already had basically almost lost the war. They were just being pushed back, but they fought until the last minute, and the Hungarians helped them gladly.
Mm. Mm.
I just want to say that you going to schools right now is such a blessing, I believe, for you and for these children. I understand that a lot of them don't get it or don't really want to get it, but there are some that are so affected by it. I've talked to kids who they couldn't think about anything else for a while.
Yeah.
And Agnes, did I understand you from our previous talks that here in America, your parents did talk to students, or at least your father did you say?
My father did. My father lived to be 92, thank God.
Wow.
Yeah, and my mother was 90 when she passed away.
Online with the class. I'll call you then.
Okay, I'm going to bed.
I'm sorry, what?
I'll talk to
Oh, Marilyn is on the phone, I think.
Yeah.
Okay. Anyway, my father, when he retired when he was 65 years old in New York. And then they moved to Florida, they moved to the West Coast, north of Tampa. There was a development they liked, and that's where they moved to. It was called Beverly Hills, north of Tampa. And I don't know what organization it was, but some organization arranged for my father and 2 other Holocaust survivors in the area to go to different schools, elementary schools, middle schools, colleges, whatever. And my father told about his concentration camp experiences. As opposed to me just being able to talk about my ghetto experiences. And towards the end, before he passed away, he was so weak already that it was hard for him to stand at the podium for so long. And they brought a wheelchair, and he lectured from the wheelchair.
Wow.
To share his story.
Yes. Wow.
When you guys were all three together, did your parents talk about?
Wait 1 second, something just came up here.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I don't know. Am I losing you? Maybe not.
We hear you.
Oh, somebody enabled closed captioning, and that's why something came up. Sharon, I'm sorry. Can you repeat that, please?
Did your parents talk when the three of you were just together for that 10 years? Did your parents talk about what had gone on before?
Not much. My mother didn't want to talk about it at all. And my father talked some, but then when they moved to Florida, and they lived here 27 happy years. So then he talked mostly to people in his area. I wish I had asked him more questions.
I don't know if everyone can see the chat. We have two messages, one from Ursula. Thank you, Agnes, for sharing your story with us. You make our congregation brighter. Oh,
Thank
no,
you.
so that was actually Barb Siegel. You make our congregation brighter. Am Yisrael Chai. Chelsea Chavez has written, yes, thank you, Agnes, for sharing your life experience during this time and your courage to share. May we never forget. And
Sharon, who was the second one? I missed the name.
Chelsea Chavez is a new member of our congregation. She and her husband and their little baby.
I remember.
Ursula said, thank you so much, Agnes, for your courage in telling us your story. Much love.
Thank you, all of you. Thank you for listening.
I just feel overwhelmed hearing the story, and I can only imagine how you feel each time you tell the story. And we thank you so much, Agnes. Cantor Manny, did you have any comment before we say goodnight?
Well, thank you. What can you say? The last 2 days, you've been really observing us. Yesterday, I did a program in one of the communities down here for Yom HaShoa, and people spoke. And today we hear Agnes. And everybody who made it through that was a miracle. And Agnes had some miracles in her life, and we're blessed to have her with us. And we thank you. You're a beautiful person.
Thank you, Manny.
Thank you
so very much. I just would like to say one more thing, if you will bear with me. And I actually wrote down because I just didn't want to forget. I wanted to say that all this happened because of people's hatred towards the race, And today there are so many races that there is hatred towards, but this was the Jews at that time. And unfortunately, it seems that people, this world will never learn because they don't learn from the past. It's continuing, and it's really terrible that it's continuing. And I don't know, I'm sure that many of you have grandchildren, and maybe you can share some of this with your grandchildren, not my personal story, but generally, so that it gets carried on, because I'm afraid once my generation is gone, that's it. That's all I wanted to say.
I'm glad you brought that up, and I do think that all the people on this program and many, many more do worry about what's happening, and we hear about anti-Semitism and other types of hatred on the rise, and we are concerned. And I think that's one of the reasons it's so important that these stories must be brought forward and continued on. And we so greatly appreciate you doing this for us, and we're thrilled to have you as our member and see you so often, and
Thank you.
wishing
I'm,
you
I'm
the best.
very happy to be a part of this wonderful group. I really am. You know, many of you know that we joined just before the pandemic, and then my late life partner, George, passed away last February. So he never really made it. And I started coming to services after he passed away because he was immunosuppressed and he could, we couldn't risk coming earlier. And you've become part of my family. So I really appreciate every one of you. Thank you.
Well, we feel the same. It's mutual. It's very, very mutual.
Thank you.
And
And
we hope to see all of you very soon, like
Friday night.
Friday night.
We are honored. We are honored to have you with us.
Thank you,
Absolutely.
Marilyn. Thank you. Thank you, everybody. I really appreciate the chance to speak with you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Agnes.
Good night, everyone.
Good
And
night.
Thank you.
Good night. Thank you.
Thank you,
Bye-bye.
Barbara.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you, Barbara and Sharon. Thank you.
Yes. Yes, we hope to see lots of you on Shabbat. Take care.
Right.
Take
You
be
will.
well. Thank you. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.